Let's start out with just a tiny bit of background about the island. The population is only at about 10,000 people. Some sources say up to 13,000. Most of them are descendant from the original 12 tribes on the island. They do have a native indigenous language, but most of the diplomacy and daily speech is done in English. The economy is essentially non-existent. As it says here, 90% of them are unemployed. And this tiny island is northeast of Australia. As you can see from this picture, it's beautiful there. Here is just kind of a timeline of some of the history on the island. The first European contact was actually with whaling ships who had come across Nauru kind of by mistake while out in the open ocean. They actually called the island Pleasant Island. Once they maintained regular contact with them, though, they would stop in and trade food and water for guns and alcohol. Guns and alcohol brought a lot of crime and violence onto the island, so eventually in 1878 they wound up in a 10-year civil war. After 1886, they had changed ownership a lot of times between Germany and Japan and Australia, and but in 1900 is when they discovered that there were phosphate deposits on the island, and that really changed things for the people here because it brought a lot of prosperity. In 1968, they had finally achieved independence. They're the world's smallest republic at only about 8 square miles, and they are the third smallest country behind Monaco and Vatican City. In 1970, they had established control of the phosphate mining on their island. They very quickly afterward became the second richest country per capita. The government has said that there are lower layers of phosphate that they want to mine, but those have been unsuccessful so far. By 2006, there's absolutely no phosphate left, and Nauru is completely broke. So now I know that you're wondering, how does that relate at all to becoming obese? They were actually hunter-gatherers before European contact. They had a lot of labor on the island done by everyone there, and a lot of fresh food in their diet. The phosphate mining had actually brought so much wealth that they were not doing any more manual labor or activity. It wasn't necessary in order to survive. And so they had also strengthened all of their trade relations and trade routes and began to import processed foods. After they had overmined the island, they were unable to grow any more food and unable to mine any more phosphate for money. So they were less active, more sedentary, still about 90% unemployed, and bankrupt, and importing cheap processed foods. Let's talk just a little bit about the nutrition and diet on the island. I thought this quote was particularly relevant. I found it on NPR. Obesity is an indicator of poor nutrition. Only about 3% of the island eats fruits and vegetables on a regular basis, even though it is unclear how regularly that is. They mostly eat fast food and processed foods. A bottle of Coke in the past was cheaper than a bottle of water. We'll talk a little more about that in a minute. Weight has always been seen as a status symbol because prior to their wealth from the phosphate mining, they had to work for their money and their food, and if they were overweight, then it showed that they were able to afford to be sedentary and didn't need to work and had a lot of food. weight has always been seen as a status symbol here, and now spam also, believe it or not, is now seen as a status symbol because pork in the past has been such a sign of status and wealth and influence, and spam is kind of the replacement of pork for them. The World Diabetes Foundation Project has talked about how locals will not get tested for diabetes, even though it is rampant on the island. I think a lot of people would rather just ignore it, and the ignorance compounds their bad lifestyles and creates a very, very dangerous health environment. So this slide is mostly just to show you just how obese they are and how much of an epidemic this is on the island. This quote is just a little bit of an explanation of how their perception of being obese is detrimental to their recovery from this. Because they see obesity as a sign of wealth, it's very difficult for them to see how unhealthy it is for them. This picture on the bottom is of a walk that the government had founded and supported that was weekly, and they walked around the airport, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. So here's just some statistics. About 95% of the island is overweight, and about 80% is obese. At least 40% suffer from type 2 diabetes, but as I said, many refuse to get tested, and many more cross into the threshold of being diabetic every day, very regularly. The life expectancy for men has dropped to less than 50 years old. Amputations, blindness, heart attacks, heart disease, stroke, and even death are totally rampant on the island and getting worse. All right, so just a little bit about the attempts to fix the problem. Schools and communities have both had programs and events to promote education for proper nutrition and encourage the communities to organize physical activities. But they can't shoulder that burden on their own. There have been a lot of global and outside resources that have come in and helped them. The Pacific Obesity Prevention and Communities Project has attempted to organize some ways to help them too. The Healthy Islands Vision Project has tried to encourage more people to get tested for diabetes too, as well as the World Diabetes Foundation Project, like we talked about earlier. In 2000, the government had founded a project to encourage a weekly walk around their airport, which is 4 kilometers. But it was eventually canceled due to increased security at the airport. In 2014, they put a sugar tax on candy and sodas and things like that. And we have that to thank, that Coca-Cola now costs more than a bottle of water on the island. And here's a short video about the Vegetable Production and Nutrition Enhancement Project. It's only a couple of minutes long, and I think it'll help you see a lot about how outside sources have come in and really tried to help the island get healthier.
The Republic of Nauru, once known for its phosphate mines, is an island located in the South Pacific surrounded by sea, with 10,000 residents in a 21.2 square kilometer area. Low in fruits and vegetables, the local people's diet is heavy in starch, fish, and canned foods, which has resulted in high rates of obesity, diabetes, and hypertension. Accordingly, the Taiwanese CDF has been implementing a horticulture project in the nation for many years to increase local fruit and vegetable production and reduce dependence on imports through the promotion of home gardens and demonstration farms. However, Nauru's lack of arable land and limited natural resources have resulted in high vegetable cultivation costs, affecting farmers' willingness to invest in agricultural production and making it difficult to increase domestic supply of vegetables. In order to help the government of Nauru improve the health of its people, the Taumane CDF proposed a vegetable production and nutrition enhancement project based on past efforts, with the aim to expand the scale of vegetable production and provide training for home garden extension agents from the Division of Agriculture in Nauru. Moreover, the project integrates nutrition education and promotion activities and, in conjunction with Taiwan Technical Mission's egg production project, supplies boiled eggs to students to boost their protein intake. The project's outcomes will be achieved through various ways of production, such as substrate culture to increase local vegetable production, along with nutrition education by short-term experts, as well as training of extension agents of the Division of Agriculture. National health is fundamental to a country's economic progress. Reducing the risk of chronic diseases cannot be achieved overnight. Therefore, the Taumane CDF has been collaborating with the Nauruan government for many years, hoping to work beyond the land limitations of South Pacific countries through the Vegetable Production and Nutrition Enhancement Project. We also hope to raise public awareness on healthy eating concepts and the importance of a balanced diet, thereby helping the local people to improve their health through a series of nutrition education activities and student meal programs.